Hey guys, this is Thomas Schmickl from the University of Graz in Austria, and together with my colleague Heiko Hamann from the University of Konstanz in Germany, I'm going to present you our short paper about free lunch in evolutionary embodied computation and in modular robotics. This is a report about the final outcome of the EU project Symbrion and Replicator, which ran from 2008 to 2013, so quite some long time ago. It was a modular robotics project, so we had modules, robotic modules like the K-bot that you see here, which is characterized by its screw drive on the bottom, where it can drive omnidirectional in all four directions. Then we had the S-bot, which had these caterpillar-like tracks, and it could only turn forward and backward and go, of course, in curves and rotate on the spot, but it could not move sideways. And then we had the active wheel with also omnidirectional wheels, and it could lift modules up, so it's basically a three-dimensional thing. And all these modules together, they could dock to each other on all different sides and form then larger robots based on these modules. We had these three different modules. We had many of them, like you see here in this picture, and this is not all of them that we had. They could all move autonomously. They acted as single cells. They could create a swarm, but they could also deform. They could bend, and this becomes important when they dock together and form larger organisms. So they dock, but they can also release the dock, so they can fall apart then again. And this way they can aggregate into many different forms of robotic organisms, and by bending of these modules, these can start to crawl. So we have caterpillar-like, some people call them snake-like, but it's actually not moving like a snake, robots, and many weird complex shapes that are very difficult to move. Hey guys, this is Thomas Schmickl from the University of Graz in Austria, and together with my colleague Heiko Hamann from the University of Konstanz in Germany, I'm going to present you our short paper about free lunch in evolutionary embodied computation and in modular robotics. This is a reflex, and it could only turn forward. Larger robots and form larger organisms. So they dock, but they can also release the dock, so they can fall apart then again. And this way they can aggregate into many different forms of robotic organisms, and by bending of these modules, these can start to crawl. So we have caterpillar-like, some people call them snake-like, but it's actually not moving like a snake, robots, and many weird complex shapes that are very difficult to move. You need very special gates for them, and the question is, how do you have a software control for such a very diverse set of body shapes? You cannot pre-program all of them, and the answer is simple. We used evolutionary computation to grow these robots and to move these robots. And for the motion, we developed as a substrate the AHHS, the hormone controller as we called it, and for the growing part, for the body formation, we used another Evo-Devo approach, which we will not talk about today. So how does the motion work? We have let's say, a given robotic organism consisting of 8 modules here. We have a front part, a head, where a blue hormone is excreted because there are some sensors. For example, they detect light and they want to go there. And then this blue hormone, it diffuses towards the tail, towards the backside, and it decays, so there is a gradient emerging there. And it could be an oscillation also being created along the line, and then you have a sort of undulatory motion. But we also have these sort of limbs here, which produce a green hormone, and then the docking points of those limbs, for example, they have a mixture of green and blue, and that can trigger then, for example, a different behavior. And this is how the whole thing works. So it reflects the body by the hormone flows that are inside. And we could also not only move these robots, we could also change the body shapes. And then you need a very robust and also flexible control of the robots. And I was coming up with the idea of a very harsh experiment. Let's give you have a robotic organism, you have some hormone gradients inside, and then you come with a chainsaw, and that's not a joke. I really wanted to do that in the project in the final review. Take a chainsaw and just cut it brutally in the middle. And the goal was to see whether I still can have two robots that continue to move and perform some task. So the body change should be reflected then by different hormone states, and then these two parts should then still continue to be operational. Yeah, we achieved this. The whole system is called AHHS, and because this is almost unpronounceable, as you realized, we usually called it the hormone controller. Heiko Hamann is now going to explain you the details about that hormone controller.
Thanks, Thomas. Hey, I'm Heiko. I will now introduce you to the concept of AHHS, which is short for Artificial Homeostatic Hormone Systems. We believe that controlling modular robots, or especially the synthesis of controllers for multi-modular robotics, is a specific challenge. So we thought it's maybe worth to look into the design of a specific architecture, controller architecture, for just this purpose. How can we evolve controllers for modular robotics? Our inspiration roughly came from unicellular organisms and how their signaling networks work. Here's the basic concept. We have sensors and we have actuators in our robot modules. We have to connect them somehow. We want to do it in the following way. So the sensor might trigger the addition or the reduction of hormone concentration, like a virtual hormone in a specific robotic module. Then these hormones in the module might also interact, actually in two ways. They might do that in a linear way or a non-linear way. Ultimately, these hormone concentrations should influence actuators. So we generate actuator values from these virtual hormone concentrations. Here, two key concepts of AHHS. Number one, hormones. We have a production rate, a decay rate, and a diffusion rate. All hormones have a base production rate, so just some virtual hormone is added at any time. They have also a base decay rate, which means hormones also get removed over time. And we have a diffusion rate, which implements this special form of communication between neighboring modules. Concept number two is rules. This is implementing the information processing, as I said before. We connect sensors to hormones and actuators. This is done through what we call sub-rules. The overall concept is a bit sophisticated, but here real quick. Each rule is triggered by a certain hormone concentration or by a sensor input, for example. Then the sensor input may also add or remove hormone concentrations. Virtual hormones interact in two specific rules, linearly or non-linearly. And we also have rules that use the current hormone concentrations in that module to control the actuators of this robotic module. And we found that overall this concept is actually competitive, especially in modular settings. And this is where the fun starts. We're going to show you three different observations, and I'm starting with number one. Evolving a decentralized gate controller for robotic organisms. In this video, I'm going to show you the results from many evolutionary runs where we try to evolve gates for multi-modular robots. All of them have this shape of 5 modules in a row, And what you see visualized is also in colors based on RGB codes, red, green, blue, the concentrations of certain hormones. You will see throughout this video different styles of gates that emerged. Later we will see a caterpillar-like motion like this one, where you can actually relatively nicely see how different hormones are triggered and then propagated through this robotic organism. Other styles are this upright walking that we saw also initially, and then later we will show you also some jumping behaviors. We have set gravity in this physics-based simulation to relatively low values, so that was then kind of allowed or expected that the robots might also jump, as you can actually see here in this particular example. And in black, it's a bit tough to see here. There's actually a wall that they have to overcome. In this robot, you see nicely how hormone is propagated in a quite distinct way through these hormones to implement yet another kind of caterpillar motion. And it's important to notice that it's really challenging in these behaviors to break the symmetry. We allow the robots to go either way, this way or that way. We just measure covered distance. Here, this robot now fell over, but at least it learned to pull its tail over the wall as well. So symmetry breaking is something that these robots have to solve. And the other challenge is synchronization. If they jump, it's of course required that all the modules act to some extent in sync. Here you see a robot that's basically loading like a spring and then releasing it at once to jump. And this is also a kind of motion that helps the robot to overcome this wall. And we were quite amazed to see these different behaviors.
Let's have a look what we found in our second observation video. In this experiment, I took a pre-evolved controller from Heiko, which was evolved for this body shape that you see depicted here. I did a whole awful lot of body alterations to this organism, for example, cutting it in the middle, as I said earlier on, and then was looking for whether or not it still continues with its behavior. So let's have a look. This is the normal behavior. This controller was evolved for this body. We see waves of red and yellow hormones going through it, making this undulatory type of motion. When I cut it in the middle, both parts walk away quite fastly, still with this red and yellow hormone seems to work very nicely and fast. When I transplanted the limbs to the outside of the organism, it totally changed its behavior. It now moves sideways. We see also a little bit of a grayish hormone appearing on one side. And so this is a totally different behavior, but still very effective and efficient. When I moved the limbs to the inside of the body, it was quite an insignificant change. It just continued with its normal gait motion. And when I added 2 modules to this limb, so I extended those limbs, it is now a heavier organism, so it moves slower, but it still continues to move. So whatever I did, it always continued to move. But now comes the real surprise. I put the robot upside down. You see the screws facing now upwards. It was never ever in this position before. It has never evolved for this configuration or situation. We see now it immediately starts to get back on its feet. It tries to self-correct that situation. We see a green hormone that is responsible for those parts that do the self-correction process. And as soon as it gets back on its feet again, it continues with its normal motion behavior. So this is a very, very specific behavior. It was never evolved for, but still it appeared out of nowhere. So this is clearly a free lunch in the evolutionary process for us. Finally, we tested these controllers also in real hardware, and we're looking what gates can we observe. Here you see a walking gait. Again, these LEDs show different types of hormones that are interacting in the body. But a similar organism can also engage in a different way of motion. Here you see a caterpillar gait. And you also see that there are different hormones produced. I always have to say virtual hormones, so of course there are no real hormones in these organisms, but they are simulated, and this is the important point. And you can also see quite complex behaviors in such organisms, like you see it here. So the red one appears, now the white one, and it lifts up its head, then it moves a little bit. After some time the red one appears again, it stops. It does some other behaviors, so quite a complex series of behaviors is going on there internally in the hormone states, but also externally. And then you see also a big organism in the right corner. It has many modules, it's quite heavy, about 20 kilograms or even a little bit more. But also this organism manages to move based on the hormone controller that we implemented. And as you can see, it moves quite nicely. So where do you find those videos? We have longer videos, more videos than you have seen. You find them with our short paper. We have cited them in the references. We put them on Zenodo and you can download them there. And we are very happy that we could do this short paper or extended abstract about our anecdotal observations that we made, because I think this is the right format to share some interesting findings in short with the community. So what did we learn from these observations? What is our take-home lesson or message from these observations? We think we found free lunch in our evolutionary processes because we have physics deeply involved in the loop on the real robots, the physics engine in the simulator, and also the way how we modeled and simulated these hormones. They involved the physics, the diffusion, the decay, the conservation of mass. And this allowed us for having a controller that can produce sufficiently complex dynamics to move these robots. We had these intrinsically stabilizing negative feedback loops by having conservation of mass of the hormones. So they cannot just fill up the whole robots towards infinity, for example. We had the control localized, so the control could reflect the position of the module in the robot body. But we had also self-organization across the body, which is very important for the coordination. And inherently, this reflects the body shape and all the changes, because the robots can dock and undock, and all of that gets reflected and can be exploited by the evolution because we have this hormone diffusion process. Of course, all of this is anecdotal, not a systematic study, but we still think it is something interesting to share with the community, and I hope you enjoyed it. With that, thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.